Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to this conversation on MEC, multiple access edge computing, and it is for a report from Senza Fili that I have written, Monica Paolini, and it's in collaboration with RCR Wireless News. And today I'm talking to Paul Stevens, who is the marketing director at Advantech Networks and Communication Group. Paul, thanks for being with us today.
Good morning, Monica. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being here and sharing your thoughts with us today. To get started, can you tell us what is that you personally do and what is that Advantech is doing in this area?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, Advantech, just to put perhaps the corporation and our particular group into context, we're an embedded manufacturer that's been in the embedded computing business now for over 30 years. We've grown over that time to be a billion-dollar company, focusing in diverse embedded and industrial areas. And we've been used to, over the years, connecting a lot of devices, sensors, and captures and so on at the edge of the network, where actually we've been doing things that are similar to IoT for a number of years. Various divisions across Advantech focus in embedded computing in all of its forms. And the group that I'm working for, Networks and Communications Group, actually focused over the last 15 or 20 years more on telecom infrastructure and enterprise security. And we're finding now that a lot of the businesses are beginning to converge as the new IP infrastructure comes into play. And to that extent, you know, a lot of our equipment is now moving out to the edge of the network as well. So where previously equipment that we've been designing for the core of the network is now finding itself out at the edge of the network, where there are different constraints as mobile edge computing and fog computing and so on start to come into play.
So what are the requirements that change as you move? You move from the core to the edge. What changes there for you?
I think there's a question of scalability and flexibility of platforms that we design for the edge. I think a couple of years ago, when NFV came along, there was some concern from our perspective that everything would disappear into data centers and into the cloud. And we'd all be out of business. But in fact, we found that continuing on with our embedded tenets, we actually have a lot of opportunities and growing demand in the market at the edge. And so we're actually beginning to use all of that experience that we've acquired with very stringent environmental specifications in central offices for carrier grade and NEBS compliance, and working in harsher, rugged environments. We're beginning to bring that into play in the systems that we provide at the edge.
Right. So there are clearly different constraints, physical constraints, but what about size, power? Is there also different constraints there? Especially as you go more and more to the edge, where you go outside in the outside world. I guess that's where your experience with sensors might come into play and help you in this process.
Yes, I think again, it's about defining where the edge actually is, because it is a bit of a moving target, and I think it will continue to be a moving target over the next few years as technology advances. In the mobile edge computing side, for example, a lot of the discussions were putting more intelligence down at the radio head or the eNode B, and we're beginning to see that actually bringing that up into a high level aggregation point is probably a better way to plan the network architecture and topology. So the devices that we've been building are more ruggedized. So if they're more for outside use, then obviously we've got temperature and size constraints as well as power constraints. And if we're moving into areas that are closer to central office requirements, then we've got to adapt to those various environmental needs and space needs. If you're close to transmission equipment, we need short depth boxes and so on. And so the products that we're designing can scale from the edge of the network with a few cores to these aggregation points where higher levels of compute and density are required, but in packaging and environmental specs that are met where required.
Right. So you can scale, and you can, as you said, the edge can be a moving target. So you're ready to go different parts in the edge. But from an operator, how do they decide where is the edge for them, for what they're trying to accomplish?
I think it will depend again on the services that they're trying to offer. So one side of the edge, if we try to do an analogy, perhaps with computer premises equipment in enterprise, where everybody's heard about VCP and technologies like SD-WAN that are beginning to take over. Obviously, the edge is very much moving between that customer premise equipment and managed services in the cloud. And you can actually move those services where you want, from the cloud down to the CPE, or have them typically running on the CPE itself. So we're looking more at having devices that are closer proximity to the user, that are more programmable, that are more flexible. And again, we can run virtual functions either on the devices that are at the edge of the network or up in the cloud, where it makes most sense from a security perspective, from a performance perspective, and also from a latency perspective.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned from a latency perspective, clearly the closer you go to the user, the lower the latency. But what about security? What's the advantage there to have it more of an aggregation point or more towards the RAN?
Well, I think security, it depends. If you look on the RAN side of things, we can see the security gateway function that's evolving, especially with densification. We're finding that is adapted more to the aggregation points within a vRAN type of scenario.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, you mentioned virtualization. What is the relationship between MEC and virtualization? Because clearly there is a link there, but do we need a good level of virtualization before an operator can deploy MEC, or the two sort of complement each other, but they don't necessarily have to coexist?
No, well, I think they go together as we're moving forward and looking at how that the whole of the ecosystem is evolving around NFV. They are really playing hand in hand. So even from an MEC perspective, all of the layers are built on multi-core processors. And virtualization becomes absolutely key. And I think that the way forward that most companies are pursuing is in network function virtualization and again, service function chaining.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then if you have a virtualized network for a single operator within a single network, you might have multiple edges depending on the application as well. So I guess that gives you the flexibility to not only define the edge, but to define multiple edges within the same network depending on the application. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's really a question of moving the elasticity comes with being able to move those applications either from the data center to aggregation points, or even much closer to the user entity. And again, where is the edge when user entities actually start to talk to each other, like connected cars talking to each other, or making use of other devices for communication purposes? It becomes a little bit more difficult of where is the edge. So I think we'll see it moving around, and that elasticity is absolutely key to be able to move those network functions around.
Yeah, so one question is clear, where is the edge? And we talked about that. Now, the other thing is that what is edge computing anyway? What does it entail? So MEC, it's a take on that. But then there are a lot of other initiatives right now, OpenFog, Cord. How do you see them playing together as we push the functionality, the processing, and the storage towards the edge?
Well, I think there's a lot of open initiatives as we're trying to democratize to some extent what we can do at the edge, because mobile edge computing offers a new ecosystem of value chain. And the idea is for operators to open up their radio access network to allow rapid deployment of new services. And I think we're still in a period of transition where 2017, we're working on proof of concepts. I think we'll start to see some more trials out there. but I think it's key that we test out the various technologies, we test out the various new initiatives to see how they come together for a better solution. We're not, as a company, Advantech, we work very closely with the vendors that are, let's say, closer to the solution. That are working in a lot of the standards. To position Advantech, we're not the solution provider. We're the building block provider. So our expertise really is in the compute engines. It's within the embedded products that we're available, that we are capable of putting into these diverse locations.
Now, you mentioned scalability before, and that's clearly crucial, the scalability, the flexibility, and in fact, a combination of the two. How can you, what's your strategy? What's your approach to provide scalability to your customers?
Well, I think it's important to be able to scale to meet performance, throughput, and connectivity needs wherever necessary. So what we're doing is we're optimizing typically platform designs to meet those overall financial constraints. So as an example, if a specific open and universal appliance at $200 or $300 is being deployed in 50,000 units, then obviously there's dramatic cost savings when compared with a standard IT server, which could multiply those investment fees by 10, 15 times. So it's very important that we work together with our customers, that's either the OEMs, in some cases, system integrators or operators, to try to tune those performance requirements for various locations in the network. Obviously, elasticity will allow us to move some of that capacity around and that compute capacity around. But we're looking at, what is the optimum platform performance that's needed in a specific place in the network.
Yeah, and I guess there are different solutions depending on who the people you're working with are. Now, how is that changing as with edge computing? Your relationship both with the vendors, OEM, and service providers, because virtualization and edge computing also changes. It's not just a hardware change, it's also the way you actually run and operate the network, the value chain. So how is that changing for Advantech?
Yeah, I think it's obviously with NFV, a lot has happened with the ecosystem. There's a lot of innovation that's been brought about by NFV, but it does mean that there's a lot more building blocks to actually put together. Hence the number of initiatives to standardize around NFV in various domains. And from our perspective, it's, there is no blueprint right now. I think the ideal situation is the one that we're working on, which is working very closely with select members of that NFV ecosystem from the NFV infrastructure perspective, and at the same time with virtual network function vendors themselves. And again, it depends really a lot on the operator themselves. So some tier ones have their own R&D capabilities and are actually doing a lot of the profiling and testing themselves. Then it will depend really on the business model that best suits them for larger scale rollout, either working with their preferred system integrators or service vendors, or doing a certain amount of that themselves. So it's quite flexible now. I think we're seeing some of those models beginning to shake out as there is deployment in various NFV applications, more in particular on the SD-WAN side. But there isn't a single blueprint really. We're working on different levels. So as I said, the important thing is to bring the ecosystem together and make sure that we're putting together the trials, the testing of all the different elements, so that we've got solutions that are proven and are ready to go.
Do you think that with virtualization, operators start taking more of a hands-on on selecting different vendors? They want to have a bigger role in that. Does it mean that you're going to be working more with service providers in the future?
Yeah, I think there is a mix. So what we've seen happen over the last year or so is several of our OEM customers have actually become the partners. So they're relying on us for the hardware development as well as the certifications. So in a lot of perspectives in the past, they would take care of certifications like NEBS for North America. And in the current situation where there's more of a partnership handoff, then we're taking care of some of those tasks that they did originally. So that's maybe from an OEM side, and really that's, I think, because the operators are trying to take a new approach with NFV. And we're seeing more of this white box approach where we're looking at a number of almost universal platforms, but at different scales. And at the end of the day, from a compute perspective, it's really how much performance you can pack into the space required, how much connectivity and offload you need to have there. So we're seeing a lot of influence from the tier one operators in that respect.
Right. Now, you mentioned trying to get the ecosystem going, and proof of concepts are a great way to do that, to explore what is possible, what is achievable. What's your experience to date on that?
Pretty good so far. I mean, from an MEC perspective, we kicked off a MEC ETSI POC back in September. We were a part of the Brocade initiative along with Saguna and Vasona, and also Gigaspaces with the Cloudify product. And the idea there was to be able to demonstrate an advanced service delivery proof of concept, which we previewed the MEC Congress in Munich. And again, that's trying to put together a platform that makes it a lot easier for developers, more from IT space, to start developing applications for something that they can easily turn into a live POC or a live trial pretty quickly. So that's coming along. The results haven't been published yet because we're still in that evaluation and development stage with some of the APIs. But I think that over the next 3 or 4 months, we'll start to see some of the results of that.
What is it you've been specifically doing? What type of applications, and what were the learning points?
I think really the learning points is bringing the various ecosystem parts together and working as a team to put together a fully functional platform, multi-vendor, multi-application MEC platform that allows both virtual network functions and cloud services to be instantiated and delivered. So we're working on MEC user plane functionality, following the 3GPP documentation, as well as developing the various MEC APIs between platforms. Some of the partners have more experience in the orchestration software portion of it and the infrastructure. And I think we're bringing that together now so that we have a platform that can accelerate some of the development of next generation apps. I mean, obviously from a MEC perspective, the new services and apps we're looking at are connecting cars, connecting to IoT, connecting to virtual reality and augmented reality style applications. And for that really to start to happen, we need to be able to put platforms out there that are ready to go and develop on, that are connected up to a cellular network, and some smaller scale trials can start to happen.
Yeah, and well, it's interesting you mentioned IoT because at the very beginning, MEC seemed to be more like the ideal. Video was the killer app, but I think that as we move forward, there is much more to it, and there's a lot of enterprise applications, IoT, a lot of vertical applications. So what that means is that the ecosystem has also to include those partners as well. So the enterprise, whichever way you want to define it, is going to be also crucial. What are you seeing in that part?
Well, that actually, from the IoT perspective, we have several divisions already in Advantech that are working on multiple types of IoT gateways in various areas. And we're beginning to bring some of our groups together now in that space. there's a certain level of convergence maybe that wasn't there a year ago, and now we're really seeing it come together. So some of these platforms, I mean, this particular platform could be seen as almost a micro data center at the box, micro data center at the edge of the network, or a cloudlet, as some people are calling them. And that's actually where we're going to find the data center at the edge of the network, handling in one particular aggregation point, perhaps several thousand IoT gateways, connected cars, video surveillance cameras, and so on. So where there's a need for fast response and latency, I think that's where we'll see that level of connectivity and local processing going on.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to say, what is unique about your contribution to the MEC ecosystem, what would that be?
I think it's providing the platforms that are really needed in the field. I mean, a lot of work in POCs has gone on standard IT servers or data center style devices. Really, when you're working at the edge, there's a point where you need to actually go out there and start testing at the edge. And that's where we're listening to all of the different requirements of players in that space for the types of performance that are required. So we're trying to put together, work with a growing ecosystem, put together something that can actually, developers can actually go out and start working on. I mean, for example, at Mobile World Congress, we'll be hooking up some remote radio heads to the platform in a vRAN type of environment. So the platform itself, the Packetarium XLC platform from Advantech, the one that we're focusing in right now for mobile edge computing, can actually bring all of that together, connecting to the remote radio heads, performing the MEC part of the application, and also then taking care of the backhaul into the core network. So we're trying to put together these platforms that are very, very scalable but very powerful, so they can take on quite a lot of remote radio heads in a denser area. They can bring in small cells as well into that type of scenario. So software-defined radio applications that are now beginning to actually take hold. We'll be demoing some of those at Mobile World Congress, so people can see that we can actually put some of these micro data centers in a real live environment.
Right. So right now, we were talking before, we're still at the proof of concept stage. When should we expect a commercial deployment of Mac applications?
Good question. I think 2017 is probably going to be more pivotal from a trial perspective, as we see, let's say, the baseline infrastructure coming together for testing and trials. And obviously everybody's got their set side as well on 5G, which is still a few years out. So yeah, we're not there yet, but I think we're going to see a lot more advances in the technology, with applications starting to actually be proven in 2017.
Mm-hmm. And what is that you will be doing at Advantech over the next 5 years? So it would be the focus moving forward.
Our focus is going to be more on adding more services where required, perhaps higher levels of integration, depending on how things move forward. And again, like I said, working ever closely with the ecosystem, bringing together the unique expertise that we have in developing hardware that sits out there at the edge, and the diverse expertise of the other members of the ecosystem. There's always a question about where we should sit in the value chain, and I think right now it's important to position us as the platform providers, or application ready platform providers. And I think as things evolve, we'll see us moving more up the integration chain to facilitate that part of it.
Well, that sounds quite interesting. It's integrating. It's a tough work, but it's very important. So, Paul, thanks for being with us today and sharing your thoughts with us as well.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks for inviting me on the call. It's a pleasure.
And this was a conversation which is part of the report on MEC and edge computing, the power at the edge, by Sense of Healy and in collaboration with RCR Wireless News. And thank you all for listening in today.